the secret catalyst behind a remarkable career shift. Some transformations don't begin with a plan. They start with a subtle tension, a quiet mismatch between who we are and who we are becoming. Most people ignore that feeling. But for one person, it became the spark that set everything in motion. It's easy to assume that major career changes come from big events. A crisis, a promotion, a sudden opportunity. But the truth is far more delicate. Careers often turn on invisible hinges, shaped by emotions we barely understand at the time. Today, as people navigate uncertain markets and evolving industries, these quiet catalysts matter more than ever. To see how they work, we go back to a moment when nothing seemed extraordinary. They were doing well, successful by every measure that usually matters. Their work was stable, their routine predictable, their goals achievable. Yet beneath the surface, something felt misaligned. It wasn't dissatisfaction. It wasn't burnout. It was something harder to define, like realizing the melody of life no longer matched the rhythm of your steps. At first, they dismissed it as temporary, a phase, a passing mood. But the feeling persisted, showing up between deadlines and in the silence after long days. It settled into their thoughts like a vague, persistent question. Why doesn't this feel like enough anymore? That question didn't demand immediate answers. It simply lingered, becoming a quiet companion that followed them through daily life. Over time, it gently nudged them toward a truth they had avoided. The future they once imagined no longer fit who they were becoming. And although they tried to ignore it, the shift had already begun. The shift revealed itself in subtle ways. Tasks that once energized them now felt strangely hollow. Praise that used to spark pride began to land with less weight. Even the routines they had mastered felt mechanical, as if they were moving through a life that no longer belonged entirely to them. They noticed themselves drawn to ideas outside their role, subjects they explored late at night, articles they saved, conversations that lit a spark they couldn't fully explain. These moments were small, but they carried a quiet significance. They pointed toward a different horizon, one their current path could never reach. Still, they told no one. The idea of changing direction felt premature, even reckless. After all, nothing was wrong. They weren't unhappy. They weren't struggling. They were simply drifting, and the world rarely understands when someone questions a life that appears perfectly fine from the outside. But the internal conflict deepened with time. A sense of longing emerged, subtle yet unmistakable. It wasn't a desire for escape. It was a desire for alignment, for work that matched their curiosity, for a purpose that matched their growth. And although they couldn't yet articulate it, their mind was already searching for a way forward. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A conversation, unexpected and brief, but insightful enough to unsettle the balance they had tried to maintain. Someone described a project that blended creativity with impact, an idea that resonated with them in a way their daily work hadn't in years. It was just a story, nothing more, yet it awakened something they thought they had lost. The feeling of possibility. That feeling lingered long after the conversation ended. It followed them home, into the quiet of the evening, challenging the assumption that their path was fixed. And once that spark took hold, the idea of staying the same began to feel impossible. The idea of staying the same became heavier with each passing day. It wasn't resistance to their current career. It was the realization that they had grown beyond it. The walls that once offered structure now felt limiting, and the goals that once felt ambitious no longer stirred ambition at all. This quiet truth unsettled them, because acknowledging it meant admitting their life was ready to change. The internal conflict intensified. Part of them clung to stability, afraid of disrupting a life they had worked so hard to build. Another part felt pulled towards something undefined yet profoundly compelling. The tension created a kind of emotional turbulence, a constant negotiation between comfort and possibility. Days that looked ordinary on the outside felt like a storm within. As the weeks passed, the spark that had once been faint grew stronger. They found themselves searching for information, exploring paths they had never considered, imagining futures they had never allowed themselves to picture. These were private explorations, small, almost invisible steps, but each one revealed a piece of a new direction waiting beyond their fear. Yet fear was always there. Fear of losing stability. fear of disappointing others, fear of stepping into a landscape without clear guarantees. Every time they felt ready to move forward, doubt pulled them back. What if the shift led nowhere? What if the dream they were chasing dissolved the moment they reached for it? The conflict reached its peak during a moment that seemed insignificant at first. A presentation, routine and familiar, suddenly illuminated the truth they had avoided. As they listened, they realized their heart wasn't the work anymore. Their mind wandered to the possibilities they had tried to silence. And for the first time, they admitted the full extent of their desire for change. The moment was quiet but decisive. It wasn't about rejecting their past. It was about honoring their evolution. They understood then that the catalyst behind their career shift wasn't a dramatic event or an external force. It was a gradual awakening, a recognition that they were outgrowing the life they had built. And once that realization settled in, staying where they were no longer felt like an option. They reached a point where hesitation felt heavier than action. The desire that once hid beneath layers of routine had become impossible to ignore. It wasn't a burst of courage that moved them forward. It was the understanding that growth demanded motion. So they began with one small step, a step that marked the quiet beginning of a new chapter. The shift unfolded gradually, then all at once. A conversation led to an introduction. An introduction led to an opportunity. An opportunity led to a leap that once felt unthinkable. With each step, fear traveled beside them, but so did a sense of alignment they had never felt before. For the first time in years, their ambition and their reality began moving in the same direction. Looking back, they realized the catalyst had never been a single moment. It was a collection of signals, subtle, persistent, easily dismissed, that pointed toward who they were becoming. The real turning point was not the leap itself, but the quiet courage to listen to those signals long before the world understood them. This is the truth behind many remarkable career shifts. Change doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it begins with a whisper that grows into a voice you can no longer ignore. And the moment you finally honor that voice, your life starts to expand in ways you never imagined. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.